Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today. It's Wednesday, but it's a tag I couldn't resist. I couldn't believe when I saw it that I hadn't done it, and assumed that I had. It's the book reviewer tag, and it was created by Gemma at Read a Book Gem, and I was tagged by Hannah at Hannah's Books. And when I first saw Hannah's video and saw her tag, I scoffed at her to the screen and said, "Art thou mad?" Because I just automatically assumed that I must have done a tag with this name, but no, no, I checked and I have not, and so I'm going to do it now, even though it's not Tag Tuesday. And the questions are all about book reviewing, so naturally I was drawn. I was drawn to the whole thing. What's the matter? Oh, there we go. All right, and they're broken up. The questions are broken up into sort of conceptual categories, and the first few are about making reviews. Number one is, where do you post your book reviews outside of BookTube? Well, as a number of you have pointed out over the years with varying degrees of animosity, I don't really post book reviews on this channel. I have never actually figured out how to do that. And the reason why is because I post them elsewhere. I am a professional book critic. I post, if you want to call it that, I write book reviews for audiences, for publication. And I do that in a wide variety of venues, and I have for a long time. The Christian Science Monitor, Kirkus Reviews, the Washington Post, Boston Globe, that sort of thing. Fairly frequently enough to make a living out of it. And I also have an online literary journal, Open Letters Review, where I post reviews along with reviews of lots of other people. But almost never on BookTube. I don't think I've ever done a full-length book review on this channel in 4,000 videos. I can't figure out quite how to do it. To me, it is. I have been doing it for so long for print journals that for me it is just inextricably a written thing. Although I don't leave any doubt about what I think about quite a few of the books that cross the screen here, so I don't think it's a complete lack. And question number two is, what is your star rating system? And of course, if you've been watching this channel, you'll already be able to guess my reaction. I don't have a star rating system, and neither should anybody else. Books can't be rated by stars. Stars have no subtlety. Stars are for people who are glancing at a page before they hurry on to their hot yoga. When books have to be analyzed, obviously I would think this, since I am a person who makes his living and his foremost joy from analyzing books. I wouldn't give a star rating system to even a bad book, and I wouldn't know how to do it either. Even if, as in the case with Goodreads or even Amazon, the criteria for what constitutes the various stars is carefully laid out and elaborated. To me, it is unbelievably restrictive and reductive. It doesn't tell you anything at all about what the person thought about the book that they are reviewing. It's not a review. It's a rating as if a book were a car or a type of inline skating. No. If you want to know what I think about a book, then you want to know what I think about a book. If you don't, if you ask me, what do you think about this book? And I say, well, let's talk about it a bit. And you say, no, just give me your star rating. Then I'm going to say, well, it's been nice talking to you. You don't actually want to know what I thought about this book, so I don't know why you lied in the first question. But we're going to stop. We're going to change the subject now. I wouldn't pursue it. I wouldn't try. So I don't give books star ratings, and I don't pay any attention to star ratings either. If you can't make a case for or against your reactions to a book, then I don't want to know your reactions to a book. So let's just move on. Question number three. Convince me to read a favorite book of yours in no more than 5 words. Again, I have absolutely no idea how to do that. I wouldn't know how to even begin, and I have no interest in learning how to do that. If you can be convinced in 5 words or less to read a book you'd never heard of before then you can be convinced to do anything. I make cases for books, for and against them, all the time. In my personal life, in my face-to-face life, in writing, and on BookTube. But it takes time. It takes elaboration. And often it takes a year or 2 to write a book. It takes another year to get it published, vetted, edited, and published. You take a time to read it. In my case, not much time, but in plenty of people, at least a few days. Why are we even thinking about reducing that experience to stars or 5 words? No. I wouldn't know how to do it, and I wouldn't want to know how to do it. Again, I would say the same thing. If you want my opinion about a book, then you want my opinion about a book. If you set a limit on it, if you say, I want your opinion about a book provided it's in star form, or it has X number of words, then, then you don't want my opinion about a book. You want, I don't even know, a Yelp rating of some kind. So let's move on. Let's just keep going. The questions aren't all like this. Question number 4. which book was the hardest to review and why. And I won't pick a specific book here because I'm pretty sure I've reviewed more books than anyone on BookTube. It's possible that I've reviewed more books than anyone currently alive on or off BookTube. But one way or another, for various venues, whether my own or in print, I have reviewed a great number of books. So I wouldn't settle on a specific thing. Instead, I'll talk about a kind of thing. And the kind of thing that is the hardest thing for me to review is the posthumous book of someone who was a friend of mine. This has happened to me probably half a dozen times in all the time that I've been reviewing books, where I had a venue, I had a voice, I had an audience, and I wanted to do that one last favor, to get this one last book in front of as many readers as possible. I wanted to do that, but it was extremely hard to do. In a few of those cases, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I knew that I could write a review, a piece that looked like a review, but I knew that it wouldn't have any of the qualities of a review that I insist that my reviews have. There are some times where I couldn't do it. Sometimes it's actually easy. But when reviews of mine have been incredibly hard or also undoably hard, that is why they have been, because it's a posthumous work by someone I knew personally and liked personally, or in two cases loved, where what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to turn that 1,000 words into anything other than an encomium for your friend? How are you supposed to turn the focus onto the book? I've had a hard time doing that in the past. And the last question in the making review section is, are there any books you won't review or give a star rating to out of principle? And you might think that, you probably heard this, that the one thing that would fall into this heading for a more or less full-time reviewer would be never to review books by friends, by personal friends. Never do that. That would be the thing that I would refuse to do on principle. That's actually not true. For me, anyway, that's not true. Because I don't have any friends that I sugarcoat things to, and I never have, including writers. I've had many, many, many writer friends in my life, and they know perfectly well they're going to hear from me what I think about their work. They're not coming to me for a cheering section. I will cheer them on, absolutely. I will encourage them to write. I will encourage them every day. Here's your motivation. Every day, here's someone who believes in you when no one else even knows you're writing anything. I will do that nonstop. Writers can draw on me for that. I am very good at it. But when it comes to critical analysis, at least I would hope I've never had a personal friend who thought that I was going to pull punches when it came to... No, that fence is very tall. That line I never cross. Because you're useless as a critic to anybody. If there's even the suspicion that you would sell your good graces because you know the author. So believe it or not, for this question, a book I wouldn't review out of principle, the most standard answer for professional reviewers is not one of mine. I would gladly review a book by a friend and tout its benefits, unless it had no benefits. If it was bad, if it was just bad, I wouldn't go out of my way to bury a book by a friend. I would just pass over it in silence. But if it had lots of strengths, things that I could recommend, I would definitely do that and mention weaknesses along the way. No, for me, the thing that I probably wouldn't review out of principle, would be a book by a personal enemy, not by a personal friend. And that might just have to do with a bloody-minded South Boston Irish Catholic mentality. It might just be that I cannot stop myself from going for the jugular when I'm reviewing a book by a personal enemy. I've only been asked to do that twice in 50 years. And in both cases, I thought, well, why don't you try the suave, sophisticated adult approach here and simply not even mention to your editor that there's any kind of connection, because there won't ever need to be. Typically, the nightmare scenario here is that you don't mention that connection to an editor. You write a hatchet job, and the author writes in, either publicly to the letters page or privately to your editor, and says, I don't appreciate this at all. You've seriously hurt my sales, and all for personal reasons. I can document that your reviewer hates me and I hate him. That's the nightmare scenario. You don't want that to happen. I have known people in previous years, decades ago, to be fired for that, for not disclosing that ahead of time. And even so, I have often, the two times that it happened to me, I have flirted with the idea of, well, just be suave, because it's never going to come up. Because even the author of the book is not going to be able to fault the objectivity of your review. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I can't do it. I've tried, and the anger and the hostility comes through. It definitely comes through. In both cases, I had to go to my editor and say, you know, I'm sorry, but I cannot do this because I know and dislike the writer. So that is, and I guess that counts as a principle, at least in my grubby canine world. That's as close as I'm going to get to a principle. So that would definitely be a case where I don't think I would even contemplate it anymore. I just automatically rule it out. And then we move on to viewing reviews. The middle section here is about consuming rather than writing. Question number 6 is, a book you really want to read has terrible reviews. Do you still read it? Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. I am not worried about what other critics say, nor am I influenced by it. Unless long after the fact, somebody might make a point about a book that I hadn't thought of and that will stick with me. But my assessment of a book, first initially, and then my studied assessment, pencil in hand, ready for an audience assessment, is my own. And it's rock solid. It comes from the fact that I don't have any self-esteem problems. I know that's going to be virtual gibberish to the 21st century. The 21st century, which was built entirely on self-esteem problems. But once upon a time, in a previous century, adults weren't riddled with such things just from stem to stern in every waking moment on every subject in every venue of their life. And I was one of those. So when I come to my conclusions about a book, I'm not worried about reading someone else's review of it, positive or negative, for fear that maybe they will show me that all my conclusions were wrong. My conclusions aren't based on consensus. They're based on my own reading. So, yes, I read reviews of a book that I want to read. Usually, thanks to my profession, I'm reading the book before there are any reviews on it. But even in cases where there are, like, for instance, advanced professional journals like Library Journal or Kirkus Reviews or Publishers Weekly will sometimes have reviews ahead of time. Even in those cases, I will hunt them down and read them, yeah. And then question number 7 is, where do you read book reviews outside of BookTube? And what is your preferred format? For instance, long, short, video, print. And here, before we get into print reviews, I will make a confession that I don't often get what the Dude Bro channels refer to as value out of BookTube reviews of books. They don't often resonate with me in a way that written reviews do. Now, that could be conditioning on my part. I think also a lot of it is that a lot of people on BookTube are very young or very inexperienced at doing reviews, so they're trying it out. The things they call a book review on their channel, in many, many cases, would not make it past an assistant editor at a book section of a newspaper or a magazine, because it's committing all sorts of errors. On BookTube, I tend much more to gravitate towards personal reactions to books. What you liked and didn't like, and why, what it felt like to read it. I tend to gravitate much more towards that, because of course that's entirely your own call. That's all subjective. How you feel about a book is entirely subjective. And so there won't be anything where I can say, I won't be watching those videos and saying, well, okay, but that's wrong, because it can't be. It's your own reaction. But in terms of where I look in print, I tried to make a relatively comprehensive list of the places where I read reviews on a regular basis, starting with the TLS, the London Times Literary Supplement. But also, I have jotted down here the New York Review of Books, the London Review of Books, the New Yorker, Harper's, the Atlantic, the National Review, the Guardian, the New Statesman, New York Magazine, the LA Review of Books, the Wall Street Journal's book coverage, the Washington Post book coverage, Christian Science Monitor's book coverage, the square-bound science fiction magazines all have reviews in the back that are sometimes very good. Publishers Weekly and Kirkus. I'm sure I'm leaving things out. There are some history magazines, for instance, where I never miss the reviews, because the reviews can get quite long and very good. And there are online places too, but that'll do for a relatively comprehensive start. And then question number 8. At what point do you view reviews of a book you are reading, before, during, or after? And do you seek out reviews similar to your own or opposing? And I'm thinking here, I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that this question is meant to say, at what point do you view reviews of a book that you are reviewing, not that you are reading? And I'm going to answer as if it did say that, because I mentioned already that I seek out reviews of books that I'm reading or planning to read as soon as I can find them. But when it comes to reading reviews of a book that I myself am also planning to review, that can be trickier. I know, for instance, plenty of publishing book reviewers who absolutely will not read anyone else's review until they've filed their own. think probably because they're worried that maybe just by mimesis they will pick up a phrase or an observation here or there that they didn't have, or maybe they're worried that they, in their mind, out on walks or in the shower, they have constructed a mental outline of what approach their review will take, and they're worried that somebody else's review will blow that out the window and suddenly they'll have to start from scratch with the mental work. I know plenty, I've known in my life plenty of reviewers who feel that way. They religiously avoid reviews of a book they are commissioned to review until they've filed their own review. I've known some who won't read other reviews of the book anyway, at any point. I'm not like that at all. I view, I'm talking about new releases here, and in the world of new releases, I view the huge concerted reaction to new releases as one enormous multi-voice choral conversation. I love that conversation. Absolutely love it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with other voices in that conversation, maybe earlier voices, informing your own reactions. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. There's nothing in the way of plagiarism, and there's nothing in the way of weakness or derivativeness involved in that at all. No, when I finish it, like I mentioned, when I finish a book, I know what I think about it. And if somebody else's review of it will help me to refine what I think about it, fine. I will read them at any point along the line. I'll read it before I've started my own review. I'll read it while I'm writing my own review, and I will read it afterwards. I love it. I especially love it when I hated a book and ripped it to shreds, and then it gets praised by critics I respect. Because then there's that delicious feeling of you're ready to be unseated. Is it possible that this person will change your mind? That's a great feeling. It's unsettling. It's an unsettling feeling, but it's a great one. And then the last section is called Stand Out from the Crowd, where you tap into your inner contrarian. In my case, my inner contrarian is also my outer contrarian. So the last two questions are, number 9 is, which book have you read with the lowest rating on Goodreads that you love? Now, like Hannah mentions in her video, I have been very dilatory with Goodreads. It's where the readers are, and it's a fantastic extended community, and yet I've made almost no use of it. Over years, long before I knew there was BookTube, I had a Goodreads account that I ignored, and I still ignore it, and that's wrong. I shouldn't do that. There are all sorts of living communities on Goodreads and living functions that I don't know anything about, that I don't partake of, and I'm sure that would enhance my life as a reader. Even my hated star ratings, you don't have to give a book a star rating on Goodreads at all. You can leave a review without leaving a star review. So like Hannah, I really need to, I've made this vow for years now, so I'm not sure how likely it is to happen, but I really need to pay more attention to Goodreads. So I don't know. When I saw this question, I had no idea what the lowest rated books were on Goodreads. And I couldn't find a feature on Goodreads itself that would tell me that, so I Googled it. And it gave me a list of the lowest rated books on Goodreads, and I was horrified to find Pamela by Samuel Richardson on that list as one of the lowest rated books on Goodreads. I have no idea what explains this. None at all. But I have to stick up for my boy. Samuel Richardson is great. He's fantastic. One of the architects of the novel as we understand it today. And Pamela's terrific and has a mawkish kind of humor running throughout it. I don't know why it would be rated so low, unless there's maybe something about Goodreads rating systems that I don't know. Or it could be for woke 21st century political reasons. Another reason I've sort of stepped warily around Goodreads is that it's absolutely infested with reading, quote unquote, scare quote, reading books specifically through the lens of the currently accepted political opinions on Twitter. YA Goodreads is particularly poisonous for this, but it's all through Goodreads. And I haven't examined it, but I could easily guess that might be a reason why Pamela is taking a beating in the ratings on Goodreads. That could easily be that enough high school students were forced to read it and thought, well, I wouldn't want to know any of these people, and I wouldn't go to the prom with them, so I'm going to blast this book. It could be that explains the rating. I don't know one way or another. And I also don't know how far that infiltration has happened on Goodreads. The limited amount that I've seen has been pretty toxic, but I admit I've seen that mostly as reflected when it's so toxic that it makes the news on Twitter or Instagram. So maybe the rest of Goodreads is relatively free of that kind of thing. That would be a deal breaker for me. Whether it's YA, Instagram, or anything like that, the deal breaker for me is if woke Twitter scolds are running the show. If they are, then I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be part of the show, because that has nothing to do with anything except power. It doesn't have anything to do with books. lowest rated book that I would recommend is Pamela by Samuel Richardson. Good Lord. And then number 10 is, which book have you read with the highest rating on Goodreads that you hated? This is somewhat predictable. It's The Green Mile by Stephen King, which is really, really, really bad. It's really bad. None of this business about how, well, yeah, King lost his way, but his early stuff is technically brilliant. None of that business. None at all. When you do that, you are moving the goalposts of what you consider good and bad, of what you're allowing an author to get away with and not. You are doing that, and you're doing it right in front of me. I can tell you how you're doing it. I can demonstrate it, especially if you're a booktuber who has allowed me access in videos to what you read and how you read it. If you give me that information, I'm going to use it when you move the goalposts, and people do that. Invariably with Stephen King, they do that, even his early stuff. And I always say to those people, okay, did you learn to read by reading these books? They say yes. And I say, is there a chance you're not being objective? in their objective critical worth, is there a chance that you're maybe not even able to see that anymore? Same thing with all of the Dude Bro authors. You can watch the person moving the goalpost, unless the person that in question never reads anything else, in which case the goalposts stay just fixed where they are. But the people, there are some of them on BookTube, they know who they are, who will claim, on the one hand, to love genuinely great authors, and also on the other hand claim to love Stephen King or Cormac McCarthy or whatever, and when they do, they are moving the goalposts. You can see them doing it. All right, this is bad writing when you're talking about good writers. It's all of a sudden not bad writing here. And why? Oh, because that's the way he does it. So The Green Mile is garbage. It's not worth your time to read. I could pick that apart. I can back that opinion up, unless you just say I like it. If you say I like it, then you and I are friends. I have nothing to complain about and nothing to attack. I myself am not a 21st century Twitter scold. I don't need you to echo my opinions of what you like and don't like. I don't need us to like the same things. I don't need to dictate that. If you say, well, regardless, or as the 21st century say, irregardless of its literary merits, I love it as a book, fine by me. In fact, I'll probably ask you questions about that. I have no condescension whatsoever on that. The only time that we have trouble is if you tell me, well, I've loved it my whole life, I learned to read by reading it, and now I want to legitimate all of that by making it great literature. The American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the National Book Critics Circle, all of them learned to read by reading Stephen King, and all of them have eventually debased their own currency by giving him high-profile awards without acknowledging that fact. And that's fine. If they do it, I can just ignore awards, but if you do it, well, don't do it, is what I'm saying. So there you go. That is the book reviewer tag. And a tag I'm amazed I haven't done, since I am a pretty prolific book reviewer. Not on BookTube, but nevertheless, elsewhere. I was a book reviewer before I knew that BookTube existed. So I don't actually know who to tag with the book reviewer tag. If you do book reviews, like for Goodreads or Amazon or elsewhere, or maybe you have a literary blog, a book blog, I'd love you to do this tag. I'd love to hear about it. And if you do write book reviews for elsewhere, well, I'd love to ask you to write book reviews for Open Letters Review, the online literary journal that I mentioned 100 rants ago. There's plenty of room there for you. If you want to try your hand at it, I would love to hear from you. But I want to hear the answers to these questions if you do any book reviews. That's fantastic. So I want to thank Hannah for tagging me. She is not responsible for the rants. And I'm gonna sign off for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.